Hello everyone. If you're watching this after the live stream, check the comments below for time codes. Should have sneezed before I started that. Didn't realize it's the light. Sorry. Sorry if I just blew everything out. I have this light on pretty bright because I have a dark shirt and it's pretty light out behind me. And I'm a sun sneezer. Yeah, so if you, we'll get started in a few minutes here. I'll say hi to folks. If you are watching this after the fact, note that there is time codes in the bottom. Thanks to David for doing those. These streams are pretty long, so those are a great resource for skipping around. Hello, JP Constantinow. Hello, Minnesota Mentat. Hello, David. Hello, MD Roberts. Hello, Unexpected Maker. Thank you all. Hello, Deshipu. Hello, Beata. And Pierre, I said hi to you as well on the YouTubes too. Yeah, sun sneezing. Looked at this bright light. But I like this shirt. I got it. I think I got it for Christmas. It's a 25th anniversary Tractor Tavern. Tractor Tavern's a local music venue here in Seattle, in Ballard in particular. I feel like my camera has shifted a little bit. Why is that? Am I just not sitting? If I position myself centered, I'm not in the middle of it. Maybe I knocked it. Better? These cables are pulling it. It's probably going to be too much. There we go. Ha ha ha. Duke has a cat. There's Kitty Cam. Hello, 2231 Puppy. Hello, Retired Wizard. Hello, Jane. Welcome back, Jane. Hello, Paul. Hello, Duke and Aditya. Hey, Paul. On Discord, and hello, Hams Labs. I'm going to wait just a little while longer. Cat's moving to the sun. Just hanging out, watching the kitty. This rough cat life that he leads. So, yeah. It was a short week this week. Spook definitely notices work days and not work days because he's up here regardless, but he gets confused if I don't come up here on the weekend. And a little sad too, I think. All right, I got a little bit of a jump start here, so let's kick it off. Let's get going. So I did really move that camera, didn't I? Hello everyone. My name is Scott, and I go by tannewt online. I work for Adafruit, Adafruit is an open source software and hardware company based in New York City, but I work remotely for them, so I'm here in Seattle. And I've been doing that for 6 years come August, so a while now, which is pretty wild. They pay me to work on CircuitPython, so software side. CircuitPython is a version of Python designed for microcontrollers. It's based on Micropython, and it's meant to be really, really easy to program computers to do what you want. So, for example, this is a ESP32-S3 board, and under this little metal thing, there's a little tiny computer that is the microcontroller. So we work on that. We make it really easy to use. The C3 is a bit of a different beast than most of our boards, but most of our boards will show up as a CircuitPy drive that allows you to really easily edit code. If you want to support me, you can support me by supporting Adafruit by going to the URL, or no, getting ahead of myself, by purchasing hardware by adafruit.com. Lots of cool stuff, lots of cutie pies coming, which are great. I thought I had a cutie pie on my desk, but I don't see one. They're great little boards for all sorts of projects. That's just one example of what you can find at adafruit.com. If you want to chat with me and a bunch of others throughout the week, Tiger Byte's impressed by the camera. Yeah, it worked well, even though it's not even on product showcase mode. I just had to like cover my face. If I don't cover my face, it does eye tracking. But if I turn it off, so eye tracking's off, and you can see that it's a little wider. You can see the top of my monitor, but now I can, even if my face is there, it knows that like it's in product mode. This camera's great. It's been well worth the money. It's a Sony ZV-1, in case you're going to ask. Okay, so yeah, if you want to chat with me and a bunch of others outside of this stream, the stream chats kind of go away. What you can do is you can join the Adafruit Discord server by going to the URL adafru.it/discord. Hop in there. We are in the live broadcast chat, and that's what you can see in the middle right here is the live broadcast chat on Discord. So this is a deep dive that happen every week, at least for the next 6 weeks or so. Normally Fridays at 2 p.m. Pacific, but occasionally shifted to Thursdays at 2. I don't really think we'll end up doing that. I should remove this from my notes. It typically goes for 2 hours or more. We tend to just shoot for the 2 hours. And questions are welcome. We've got tons of time. So if you have questions, I'm happy to try and answer them. Even if I can't answer them, there's usually folks in the chat that know. Last step, all notes are available on GitHub with links into the videos. So thank you to David and Patrick for putting all of the notes. David takes the notes, and Patrick's been doing an awesome job getting those all in a central place with links into these videos. They tend to be really long, so the video links are really helpful to like find a particular spot in a particular video. So thank you to Patrick and David for doing that. And yeah, if you want to check that out, that's a deep dive notes. And I'll just paste that in the chats right now. So there's a few more people I should say hello to. Hello C. Grover. Hello Tigerbyte. Hello Rich Sad. Hello Dexter Starboard. Welcome. And Bruce. I missed Bruce in the YouTube chat as well. So hello everybody. Okay, so let me double check that I've paused these videos, which I don't think looks like I did. And I will scooch it down. What I was thinking we would do today is we could, well, if you have questions, ask them. I'm happy to answer them. But then I was going to cover CircuitPython 2022. I realized like right after my stream last week that I talked all about my version of it, but I hadn't covered like the other posts that folks have done. Hello, Mark. So I think I'm going to shoot for like, say like we've got one more week and then we'll be done with it. So if anybody has ideas about what CircuitPython should be, kind of longer term goals and things that you think that it would be cool that CircuitPython did, that's kind of what this planning is all about, is saying like, hey, like this long-term thing could be really neat. And we'll talk over a lot of those ideas today. And also, if you have questions, feel free to ask them. So one thing I do is when I post all these blogs with this tag, and so you can see all the ones this year, but I also maintain a list at the bottom of all the posts I do. So the first one that I wanted to just briefly talk about is Ken emailed this into the, so there's an email, CircuitPython2022@adafruit.com, that goes to me and Phil, and then I blog it out so that everybody can follow along. Hamslab says, it's nice that you now have a big variety of potentiometers. I have a friend who's getting started with analog audio circuits, and this is going to make things easier for her. Neat. I've not done a lot of that. I briefly touched on synth stuff, but haven't done a whole lot. Okay, so Ken sent this in for CircuitPython 2022. It's not super CircuitPython related, but wanted to point out this circuito.io, which could be cool for folks. So it's a like prototyping, like put things on a virtual kind of project space and figure out how to wire everything together. And they were asking, Ken was suggesting that we have Adafruit boards in there. So not super CircuitPython-y, because it doesn't actually have to do with the CircuitPython, but it's a neat idea anyway, so I blogged it up. So that's the most recent CircuitPython 2022 thing we've done, and now let's just go through and kind of from newest to oldest, what folks have been talking about. So Kevin here, who's done a lot of display I/O stuff, and also, oh, I see a question. What was the Discord? I'll give it to you. adafruit.it/discord. C. Grover asks, when debugging with print statements, is there a way to include the statement line number in the print string? In C there is, I think, but not with Python that I know of. There might be, but I don't know it. Share screen. Thank you. Yendar asks, does CircuitPython have the ability yet to play simultaneous audio via two-way files or foreground, background, maybe through a mixer? We do have a mixer class that can mix audio from different sources. I'm not sure we've tried it with two WAV files at the same time. Moving the amount of data that WAV files is through the memory system when it hasn't been super optimized yet is kind of it's tough. It's really tough. Audio. I did a lot of the audio work a few years ago, and it's really not easy to work with. So it might work is my question or my answer. All right, Thomas has a question about a particular issue, so let me actually switch to the desktop. Thank you, Dexter Starbird, for pointing that out, that I wasn't showing my desktop. Oh. $588. So Thomas is asking why this issue is marked long term. It is returning the address for an existing connection. So I don't think that I think this is a tricky thing to do. And I don't. Okay, so let's talk about BLE. So BLE is where you're connecting one device to another. The device that initiated the connection is known as the central. The device that it connected to is called the peripheral. Peripherals will advertise that they can do something, and then that is what the central uses to initiate the connection. What Thomas is asking for is the ability to be connected to, as a peripheral, be connected to multiple peripherals and be able to know which one you're setting HID codes to. This is not something we handle well. If we look at the BLE HID library, so the gist is we can only work on stuff so much. So long term is about like, yeah, it's a good idea, but none of us are going to work on it right now. Meaning when I say that, it's Adafruit prioritization, not like if somebody fixed it for me, I would love that. But kind of Jeff, Dan, and I are already working on stuff. Trying to remember if HID is here. So it's not. What does HID use? It's not as simple as just getting the BLE address of the central that you care about, because I don't think, oh, well, yeah, so there's no current way. So this is how the report gets sent, just by setting the value. It's kind of antithetical to the way that the BLE GAT stuff is designed. The GAT it's this idea that you are a server of values and those values are the same to everyone. And so this idea that like you want to be able to do different values to different people that are reading your values, like different centrals are connected to you, is like not a simple change. Yeah, so there's that aspect to it, which is like it's not a simple thing to do, and therefore it has to get prioritized with other stuff that we're working on. And the other stuff that we're working on is more important for us. And then the other thing is that I posted this. Oh, you want to disconnect the undesired centrals. Well, I think, yeah, I guess if you disconnect the undesired central and then don't advertise, then they can't connect back to you. I think that it might be pretty simple. We could even look like just getting the MAC address for a particular connection might be pretty straightforward. So if we just go in ports, NRF, common HAL, BLE IO, connection, a connection object, gets whether it's paired, gets whether it's connected. You can disconnect it. You can initiate pairing. You can get the connection interval, max packet length, set the connection interval, run discovery on it. Discover remote services. Yeah, so I don't think that it would be Thomas, so there are a number of issues for those of you watching. There are a number of issues about this. One approach is to determine the MAC address of the thing that you're connected to, and it would involve modifying this file and exposing another attribute on a connection. The other thing that I've pointed out on the BLE issue about this is that once you're connected, there's usually a device info service that is available to you. So one of the confusing things about BLE is that there's the notion of central and peripheral, but those are really roles that only matter for who initiates a connection. After they're connected, like both sides can provide services to the other side, and one of the services or servers that one of the services that the central can provide to the peripheral is called device info service, which says is a way for you to get like, oh, I'm connected. this connection that I'm talking to is an iPhone. So I think that you should look into device info service, because that is going to give you a human readable version of what you're connected to. It's not just going to give you a MAC address. And I tried to point that out, I think, on the BLE issue about this. So if we look at not file transfer. Maybe not. I don't remember where it was. I see it in my email and I respond there. But I would recommend, in addition to talking about this MAC address stuff, look into device info service. I think that's what you actually want. And you should be able to do that. I don't know of any examples, so this is off the beaten path, but you should be able to do that without any changes to the core CircuitPython. Basically, once you have for every connection, get the device info service from the thing that you're connected to and see what device it is. It's only really going to break down if there's no like serial number that you can get that way and you're connected to two of the same thing. But I think that's probably not what you're talking about. Okay, let's keep going. I know I can tell you're frustrated, but we have a lot of people wanting to do a lot of different things, and we have to be able to prioritize between them all. Going back to the two wave files thing, Mark said it tried it. Foamy Guy said I did manage to get it working for small stuff. On the Arduino side, it's not in the HID, it's on the connection object. Right, on the BLE connection object. Huh. HamsLab has a way to get a line number. JP says, MAC address is what I do to manage profiles in BlueMicro BLE. Yeah, I'm open to adding it, but hello, Andrew. All right, let's keep going. All right, Eli's got a question. It says, hey, I was working with the analog in features on a QtPy 2040, and when I tied the pin I was reading from to ground on the board, it was giving me a value other than 0, around 160. Is this normal? Yes? I don't know. I think, I don't know. I don't actually know. I would have to look into it. There are weird things where pins are not the same. Like ground references are not the same, but I don't know. Feel free to file an issue, Eli, about that, and we could have other people look at it, into it too. Thomas, it sounds like you're frustrated. That's why I was thinking that. Hello, Adam. Okay, Unexpected Maker says, hey, Scott, just grabbed and built the latest CircuitPy for S3. Doesn't boot on any of my S3 boards, known issue. Copy it over, seems okay, restarts, never mounts, no error on UART, 0 output. It was broken yesterday for a little while, I think, and then I fixed it, and maybe it's broken again. A lot's changing. But when you mean latest, I like triple check that it's like not a couple days old. Okay, let's go through this CircuitPython 22 stuff. So Kmatch posted this stuff about both 22 and 21. 21 highlights birth of the bitmap tools in core, starting with roto, zoom, and growing. Yay. Added graphical widgets for displays and touch response. Widgets, button switch, progress bar, dial gauge, Cartesian graph, and flip input icon. And then display IO layout to simplify widget layout. Kevin says, I see growing use of examples for vector IO, an awesome set of tools for graphical shapes, a learn guide on optimizing CircuitPython memory use, and tangential to CircuitPython, demo the tiny logic friend, a logic analyzer running on Cortex M4 that connects to SIGROC for analyzing I2C and things. I think that, yeah, Kmatch is totally right. Kmatch was one of the core people on the display IO side of things, and it's been really awesome. And then for 22, introductory examples of graphical widgets and input response handling. More cool widgets and expansion of vector IO examples. Yeah, Kmatch has been an awesome part of display IO widget stuff. Foamy Guy's done a lot as well. And it's been really nice because I've kind of moved past it. I'm working on other stuff. And so it's really cool to see it being really mature with all the work that these folks are doing. All right. And then reasonably priced capacitive multi-touch capable display. The superflash display interface board. I know that the Espresso folks released the HMI board, but I'm not sure whether that counted or not. I feel like I looked this up when Kmatch posted this too. So yeah, that's cool. I think all the graphic stuff is going really cool places, and it's not something I'm working on. Okay, next up we have, actually these are the first people that posted. I said I was going newest to oldest, but it's actually oldest to newest. This is from Jeff Epler, who works for Adafruit on CircuitPython. Some of the goals I proposed for 21 have been accomplished, like support at least one new microcontroller family. And like we talked about last week, we knew the RP2040 was coming. Partially address the problem of time required to build CircuitPython core. We talked about that before. Circup and Bundlefly greatly ease problem of gathering items. In Learn, we've got more systematic about how programs and their assets are organized, and the Bluetooth workflows in the wild and people are using it, such as the PyLeap app for Apple phones. At a personal level, I accomplished one of the goals I listed, including 3D stuff. Some stuff we started but want to keep doing is continue to help people grow into roles of reviewer and contributor, which is totally important, and we should do that. And then there's more room for how-to video content with CircuitPython. Some big pieces of progress we made that I didn't even anticipate but wish I had were getting up to date with Micropython and then continuing to merge in new releases, releasing Async IO support for CircuitPython, and adding type stubs to the core and types to many libraries in the bundle. In 22, Jeff looks forward to implementing new drivers for hardware I hadn't dreamed of working on, like old DOS floppy drives. Adapting algorithms into CircuitPython, let's do more image processing or maybe start doing audio processing, and finding small efficiency improvements and firmware size savings when they're needed. I want to both learn more about and improve Async IO, Personal project goal would be to have an interactive display that continues to update and respond to input even while doing Wi-Fi requests, which is a great goal. And looks forward to hearing from everybody else. Beata says heart async IO. Yeah, I'm excited about that too. I'm not the right person to do it, but I'm excited that folks are working on it. All right, next up we got something from RSBone, who says, for CircuitPython 22, for the broadcom ports, I would really like to have an onboard editor, something simple that would allow for standalone coding beyond what you can do on the REPL. I would also like to explore the possibilities and limitations of MIDI on CircuitPython. And Gmeter commented as well about MIDI on CircuitPython. Yes. And also, I would love USB host capability to add to CircuitPython. So common, inexpensive MIDI controllers that only have a USB cable could be used. Yeah, this is something that I mentioned before in my CircuitPython 22 is like, I would love to see us start to support USB host. I think USB has been so beneficial for us doing well in CircuitPython that host would be as well, would be really beneficial. Yeah, unexpected maker, we can get into the ESP stuff after I go through here. I just wanted to cover it. 3 different topics. Okay, so Kay Sprayberry says, a big long thing that was basically talking about how our networking stuff isn't cross-compatible that well. And then furthermore, it would be nice to have the libraries support multiple SSIDs. Like secrets.py now, I think only supports kind of one set of credentials. Whereas multiple different SSIDs would allow you to move it different places. So that's on the forum. And it's a great tidbit as well, I think. And let's see. This is the comment here. Matt said, for 22, I'd like to see more information and tutorials on the WIO and the ESP32-S3 box. First working with them locally and then utilizing Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. So one of these is really easy and one of them is really hard. The WIO terminal has a separate coprocessor for it. That's going to be really hard, but the S3 box does not, and so I would kind of expect it on the S3 box, but not on the WIO. All right. HemsLab is going to look at Bluetooth MIDI on the ESP32 soon. Yeah, onboard editor for CircuitPython like PyBasic. Yeah, but I think you need USB host. I think it's more interesting once you have USB host. So Pierre's got this really long overview of both BlueMicro and then CircuitPython. So I'm not going to show it all. If you want to look at this stuff and follow along, you can check out the blog. This is a really detailed post about all things Bluetooth, I think. But here's the CircuitPython 22 section. Lots of focus on keyboards. It'd be nice to support keypad extensions or GPIO expanders. I think natively is what Pierre is talking about. Key matrices that don't have anti-ghosting diodes. And make your own seesaw. Very useful to be able to create your own seesaw device using CircuitPython. Yeah, so that would mean implementing I2C peripheral, which we have in some places, but not everywhere. And then split keyboards, which I have one of, and I was thinking again today I need to finish getting it going. But the RP2040 has the problem that the UART is only on certain pins, but I actually did add PIO UART support. So I did let Pierre know that. And then very deep sleep. Yeah, that stuff's really tricky. More filtering on CircuitPython.org. I agree, that would be good. I think this is interesting. RISC-V is not quite the same as these cores are, right? RISC-V is really the API, and then the implementation is a particular core. So like, I forget what the name is, but like in the ESP32-S3, which has a RISC-V core, it's got like a name for the core itself. It's not just RISC-V. RISC-V is the API, like the interface, the standard API that the CPU implements. Whereas like these ARM Cortex ones implement like ARM v7, ARM v7M, for example. But yeah, and awesome CircuitPython improvements. Both the website and the awesome CircuitPython are open for pull requests, so I'd love to see people edit that. Yeah, Foamy Guy points out that folks in the Discord chat are talking about small editors. And then Foamy Guy points out that Kmatch already made a basic one. Tigerite says it would be funny to use a canned featherwing to network a split keyboard. Yeah, I was looking at that a little bit, see how people do it. I2C and spy peripheral every now and then. I'm not sure exactly what spy peripheral means. You know, one of the tricky things with native CircuitPython APIs is figuring out how to insulate the CircuitPython code from like real-time constraints. And that, I think it's pretty tricky with spy. Okay, so that's Pierre's post. Blake has a few short ones. Overclocking added to CircuitPython. I think that could be really interesting. How we do it exactly is tricky. The clocks that go to cores tend to have other things clocked by them, and so that can make it really tricky to do dynamically, which people usually want. But it's probably more worthwhile putting time into making sleep states lower power than worrying about overclocking. But I could be wrong. Blake BR also says, add a feature where CircuitPython gives test results telling whether CircuitPython in use is loaded to the proper platform. That can be pretty tricky because it's hard to know what board you're on from the like microcontroller's perspective. That's why we have different builds. Because the microcontrollers don't actually know what board they're on. That could be tricky. I mean, if it's spy peripheral is somewhat like PIO, then like we could potentially add that to other stuff. List of platforms of interest for CircuitPython 22. Oh, let people log into the site and only see builds for those certain things. That's a lot more complicated than the site is right now, right? Like CircuitPython.org is all static. So yeah, it's a neat idea to be able to do that. And I've heard some things about like a My Adafruit page. Maybe we could integrate it there instead. Okay, let's keep going. So, Retired Wizard says, oh yeah, this is interesting. Intuitive flash file system commands. Adding it to the REPL. Maybe we have like a FS module, but we don't want to get away from like what is proper Python, unfortunately. Ways of dealing with sensitive data. Yeah, that can be tricky. I think there's those like I2C things that store secrets. So yeah, I think that's going to be a really interesting world where when we get to the point of having USB host and having CircuitPython kind of like standalone. All right, M. Lewis says, I would like limited multi-core access to the second core on CircuitPython for the RP2040. It's okay if it's just C and C++, but it would be cool to have a way to like communicate back and forth. And I asked a follow-up about how you would do memory and stuff and didn't hear back. I think it's really tricky. I think multi-core is really tricky. Ryan says, if any of your viewers could please take up I2C peripheral support for the RP2040, I would be grateful. Yeah. The nice thing is that we've already established an API for it, so it wouldn't be quite as hard to implement. HamsLab says, I wonder if some company will design architectures for RISC-V and license those. 100%. I think that's going to happen. I2C is really the one that most would ask for, as it doesn't need many wires. Yeah, so what I would do, if I were to do I2C peripheral, I would find the port that it's already implemented in, duplicate that code into the port I wanted to support it in. So that's going to be all your common HAL functions. And then delete all the implementations and then re-put it in. Not directly CircuitPython related, but you ever see those Lego sites where you can catalog all of your Legos and then they tell you you can build with what you have? That would be kind of neat for Adafruit Learn System. That would be pretty neat. In fact, Tigerbright, you should link to the Lego thing because I'd be curious. I'd be curious to see that. I don't have any Legos here, but I imagine a future where I have Legos. So that sounds really handy. And yeah, I think like Adafruit already keeps track of what you bought, so we could do things like that of like, here's all the learn guides that you could build with the things you bought. I think that'd be neat. I think the proper way to suggest that is to actually email support with the idea, support@adafruit.com, and give them that idea. I think it's a good one, especially if we're doing this like my Adafruit sort of idea. That could be a great place for it. Like, here's a new guide, and you already have all the all of the stuff. Okay, so what John says is it would be a good idea to generalize the event system used by Keypad so in other core modules will be able to deliver events in a common queue. And Dan says, take a look at this guide. I agree that we could generalize it. I don't know. I think the async stuff is early days still. We'll see. And then this is build an Amiga in CircuitPython. Better camera video input support. Yeah, camera's gotten a long ways this year, but there's a long ways to go still. SNMP. Yeah, this is Phil's wanting to do like video mixing stuff, is what he said for CircuitPython 22, which is pretty tricky. Okay. So Ask Patrick W did kind of a recap of goals. Or wait, has new CircuitPython 22 requirements and design of a system to use CircuitPython as a basis for a camper van or RV or boat monitoring, tracking, and alerting system. And then second, a 3D mouse. Design a 3D CAD mouse that will work with Fusion 360. This might also be called a jog wheel. And then for 21, CircuitPython secrets. Not clear how we could get an os.get environment stuff going. Package management. Circuit made big leaps this year and is working well enough. I do think long-term the download the zip file approach becomes too fragile and too hard to centrally manage, but it works great for now. And then CircuitPython cameras. The notes I put together focused on higher-end camera capabilities. Adafruit did create camera libraries which will work in the lower resolution cameras, but nothing high resolution that I'm aware of. With CircuitPython on the Raspberry Pi, I wonder if it can find a path forwards. The high-quality camera with a 12.3 megapixel Sony IMX477 camera, or a sensor. Yeah, there's a lot of work that could go there still. If it showed all the learn guides for what I bought, it would be a long list for some of us. Yeah. I think a future collaboration between Adafruit and Lego would be pretty awesome, and Lego is very specific, and the correct term is Lego bricks, not Legos. Well, I am not an official Lego person, am I? I think it's tricky to collaborate with Lego because they want NDAs and long timelines, from what I've heard. Hamslab says Python threading is pretty weak. It really should be able to handle multiple cores and do real-time multitasking. I've always wondered why this hasn't happened. I think I have a lot to do. Oh, this is an issue with mainline Python. That's part of the reason it hasn't done in CircuitPython is like mainline Python still all this multitasking stuff is pretty young in regular Python. So there's not like a de facto implementation that we just crib. And it's all been network driven as well in CPython. And then in CircuitPython, it's always come down to like, do we spend our time doing multi-core multiprocessing that very, very few people are going to use? Or do we add a new chipset support, which then Adafruit can sell? Or do we add support for new peripherals, which then we can also sell? Like it's just not used by that many people, I don't think. We covered mine last week, so let's skip over that. We're almost done, and then I want to talk about ESP stuff. Hopefully Unexpected Maker's still around. I did a random smattering of things this week that we can talk about. So Anne, who does the newsletter for us, says, things I'd like to explore in 22, a handheld CircuitPython device. The keyboard Featherwing by Arturo 182 is fantastic. And this kind of gets into the like onboard experience. How do you do it kind of all together? Anne also wrote PS2 keyboard support, which actually we do have a PS2 IO that people contributed. And then third, Anne said USB host support, which is also neat. Okay, Unexpected Maker, we're about there. Anne also says new home with nodes for sensors, likely networked over Ethernet. WizNet has some nice Pico-based boards. Look to ensure networking maybe a dozen remote nodes with a central Ethernet CircuitPython device running CircuitPython would be excellent. I love the RetroTech interfacing. I do work on IBM PC and XT computers, perhaps AT. I love to use CircuitPython to make floppy controllers, USB to serial adapters, Wi-Fi adapters, and much more. Beefy microcontroller or Raspberry Pi Zero devices, but prefer microcontrollers to avoid Linux overhead. Such an untapped field. There's so much RetroTech that could use some love, and CircuitPython is a fabulous tool. Yeah, I think some of the retro tech stuff would be really neat too. Let's see. Rich says, I support your thinking on the multicore stuff, Scott. I would use it, but if I had to, I could use C++ or Micropython. HamsLab also points out, once things move forward more with multicore ARM chips, there will be more demand for this. And Dylan agrees too. I should always say, if anybody wants to add multicore stuff to CircuitPython, I'm open to it. I'm not going to say no to it. I'm just saying I'm not doing it myself. Bye, Rich. Enjoy your Thai food. Cams says, most developers mess up multi-threaded code. Too much of it is non-intuitive and really easy to get wrong, creating some really difficult and obscure issues to debug. 100%. I agree with you. I think it would be cool. I think one of the first cool uses for multicore could be like this audio playback stuff that we're talking about could really potentially benefit from being on a second core. And then Microlab, ulab, is like super helpful, and it's all about number crunching. And that's, if you're doing number crunching, like I could imagine a world where Microlab itself uses both cores just to like crunch numbers faster. I think would be really cool. But that doesn't mean that like Python has access to it. It's just like something that internally we'll just use to speed things up. I'd love to see it, but it could be a support nightmare. Yeah, I'm already cracking open a support nightmare with these chips that don't have native USB. I am understanding that I'm doing that. CPython, there are attempts to do better multi-threaded, but among issues I read that the CPython core team said they would reject any multi-threading solution that caused any reduction in single-threaded performance. Yeah, Dexter just points out, if you want multi-core, just use multiple feathers. That's true too. And I think the other thing I was going to say is that it's important to think about concurrency as more than just multi-core, because I think in general, CircuitPython does a pretty good job of trying to utilize other peripherals to do work concurrently. So there's that. It's important to note that PIO is an obvious example because it's running like its own assembly code, but like doing DMA to an audio output, like that's concurrency. It's just not CPU concurrency. Hamslab says, oh man, I'm all about digital audio. Maybe this just moves up a bit on my list. I'm working on an audio in-out featherwing, so this makes a lot of sense for me to look into. Yeah, our inspiration for the audio stuff has always been Paul Stoffергren's teensy audio stuff. We're not there yet. We can't compete with like it. Paul did a great job, but we were. It's got too many Arduino-isms to just use straight up. In JavaScript, other core stuff is sort of in a separate VM and passes messages with main. Yeah, I was thinking about if we did multi-core stuff in CircuitPython, we could treat it more like multi-processing than like threading, where it's like two copies of CircuitPython that are independent and only have this like FIFO between them, for example. Tammy Makes Things says, I'll try to do a CircuitPython 22 post this weekend, but after a pandemic-related layoff and a serious health crisis last year, I'm trying to get back to CircuitPython and making in 22. One thing I'm planning to start doing in the next month or so is make CircuitPython streaming on Twitch. I'll keep the community posted. Yeah, please do. We'd love to see more CircuitPython streams. There was also just an announcement of a new CircuitPython podcast from Paul Cutler, who's in Discord, and I'm going to be on. It's going to be out in a few months, I think, so not immediately, but will be. It sounds like it's going to be really cool. Keith says that Microlab extension to do number crunching would be neat, but yeah, implementing it would be a support nightmare. Hamslab says Paul's audio library is great, 100%. Hello, Bryson. Rebrickable.com. Thank you, Tigerbite. Retired Wizard says, I played with the Micropython multicore a few months ago, and it wasn't stable, and the communication between threads was really weak. There was no way to easily talk between threads. Yeah. Linux 203 says Adafruit requests and Adafruit mini mqtt would be nice to be threaded. So I don't threaded in the threaded sense. I don't think we're going to do, but I think that for async IO work we're going to do in 22, I think that mqtt and HTTP are definitely things that we want to think about doing. All network stuff is like benefits a lot from async IO. So I think like there's AIOHTTP is like the standard, kind of like one of the main standard libraries. It's the equivalent of requests, but for the async IO world in Python. So I wouldn't be surprised if one thing we tried to do is like make a library like this for CircuitPython that allows you to use async IO for networking. I don't know what the mini or the mqtt version of that is, but I think that's probably the most likely async IO stuff that we're going to be doing. Yeah, Dexter Starboard says, yeah, awaitable networking would be great. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty likely in 22, if I had to guess, especially as we're going further into the ESP ecosystem this year. All right, Mark said on Twitter, and also goes by Gambler on Discord, for CircuitPython 22, so one good thing for me comes from the last 2 years. It's how I fell into this community. What started as a tool for my random projects morphed into me opening the hood to see what made CircuitPython tick, and my first true open source contributions. I didn't contribute as much as I wanted in 21 doing reviews when I had the time and energy. My highlight would be incorporating support for the IS31FL3741 LED driver into the core of CircuitPython, allowing Arduino like speeds from Python. So what's next for 22? I had no set plans, but I've always wanted to experiment with multi-core support, which is what we're talking about, for the RP2040, and how Micropython allows native MPY files to be imported, and how that could work for power users of CircuitPython. But really, I just want to keep providing meaningful contributions, assisting others where I can, and watching this amazing community grow. Thank you, Mark. And also, almost forgot, I designed my first board with a microcontroller, the ESP32-S3 in 21. It was amazingly quick to get CircuitPython running on it. The board is very much a work in progress, but seeing my own board run CircuitPython was pretty wild. I can relate to that. Does Wippersnapper use mqtt? I'm not sure. Brett would know. CircuitPython show tweet. Carestring points out that HTTPX is another one. There's a couple async HTTP libraries. And Mark says, when I never have to type the IS31FL3741 again, I'll be happy. I can relate to you. I can relate to that. All right, so last up we have just a quick thing from Mark S., who just emailed in and said, I'll summarize, was basically wanting to encourage us to be more sciencey in our projects. They talk about earth science projects and botany, mycology, habitat monitoring, crop science, pollution detection and quantification, climate change research, just to name a few. I think one of the challenges with this stuff is just like doing hardcore sciencey projects requires hardcore sciencey people, and I don't necessarily know that there's a lot of folks at Adafruit or who work with Adafruit that do that stuff. So I'd say that if you're in this category of like very hard sciences oriented folks and you have projects, like reach out to us, show them on Show and Tell, and then maybe we could get projects built off that. All right, I think that's it for CircuitPython 22. So I know there's a number of you watching, and if you haven't posted anything, I'd love to hear your thoughts about what you'd like to see in 22 for CircuitPython. As we talked about last week. For me personally, it's going to be a weird year because I'm going to be taking 18 weeks off because we're expecting our first child, which is exciting. So it's not work I'm going to be doing necessarily. But I think the cool thing is we have a community of people working on stuff. And by talking about these longer term things, like there's a number of folks in the Discord chat and the YouTube chat who want to see like multicore. Like you could imagine those folks getting together and working on multicore together. And last year, the folks that were working on all the graphic stuff is a great example of that as well. So I think that's a cool way to do it. And I think that's why like these annual planning things are important. Baby time. Yep. Looks like Wippersnapper does use mqtt. I'm bad about writing up projects too. Hello, Oats and Honey. And Maiko, I don't think I said hi to you either. Hopefully I said it right. Okay, we're an hour in. We got an hour left. So let's switch gears into ESP-land. Does that sound good? I'll take a talking break and drink some water. If folks have questions, I'm still very much open to questions, obviously. Seagrover says, for STEM use, it would be nice to have a standard data storage and automation protocol supported in CircuitPython. What do you mean by automation protocol? Data storage, there was some interesting stuff in Micropython done for SQLite, which I think would be really neat. I'm a huge fan of SQLite. It gives you all the power of SQL without having to run a separate service, which I like. All right, let's do ESP. So it was a short week for me. In the US here, we had Monday off, so I didn't get a lot done. My main overarching project is I'm working on adding BLE support to the ESP, to the Espressif port. So the Espressif port was originally done for the ESP32-S3, which is the first ESP chip that had native USB. And then Microdev did a lot of work to generalize it. So now it's C3 and S3 as well. And we actually want to add ESP32 support in the future too. Steamy Mix asks, how many cores are on the ESP32-S3? There's 2 main cores, and then I think there's also a low power core, so 3 technically. So the way that we have it set up right now with CircuitPython is that the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth stacks should run on the Pro core, which is short for protocol core, which is core 0. And then CircuitPython should run on the second core, core 1, along with Tiny USB should run there as well. So that's, yeah, 2 is the answer that people will mostly think of. We don't use the third one. Scientific instrument control, like IEEE 488. Yeah, I think the science-y stuff is just like, I've never gotten into the weeds with that stuff. I think it's probably better served by people who know it better. So creating CircuitPython issues is a great way to find other people to work on stuff like that with. I've been known to make my own standards. I'm guilty of that. Okay, so branches-wise, if you want to follow along with the BLE work that I've been doing, the best way is to go into my tannewt CircuitPython and then look at active branches. And you can actually see I have a lot of active branches right now. I've been doing a lot of random stuff. But there's this ESP BLE ESP-BLE. And they made it harder to compare the branch against the other stuff. But the gist of where I'm at with ESP-BLE support is I did what I was suggested for the I2C peripheral stuff earlier, which is you take an existing implementation. So I took the _BLEIO implementation for NRF and I duplicated it into the Espressif port, and then I deleted as much as I possibly could. All the stuff that was like specific to NRF, and then I worked to get it compiling on the ESP. And the reason that I am taking that approach, I didn't get as far as I wanted to, but the reason I'm taking that approach is that I'd like to get it compiling even if it doesn't work, so that as I add things that I think should work, I can test them, right? The other way that I could do it is I could like take all this NRF code, replace it with what I think is the right code, and then just work to get it all working all at once. And that's a good recipe for not being able to complete anything. So it was interesting, even because there was a few things that I just like switched a little bit. Hamslab's suggesting get beyond compare. It does nice things with Git. I actually have I pay for Sublime Merge. So if we want to look here, we could do that. So like here's ESP-BLE. This is the last commit I made for it. Here you can see that this is like I duplicated the files, I deleted more stuff, I made compilation fixes. So I had to do things like, you know, add more headers. And then what I was working on yesterday was I actually had to tweak like the cmakeLists file and the make file to actually get the libraries linked in. I really like the Sublime stuff, so I use Sublime Text, and Sublime Merge was a pretty obvious thing to do as well. Pierre says, how much power does the ESP32-S3 use with BLE, no Wi-Fi? Assuming Wi-Fi will take a whole lot more. I have no idea. Maybe Unexpected Maker knows, but I haven't gotten there yet. It doesn't work yet, so I can't tell you. I have no idea. Probably not as good as NRF, because NRF is quite good. But having BLE and Wi-Fi on the same chip is going to be pretty nice. Like I did this, when I did BLE a while ago, I did BroadcastNet, which was this idea of like, you can take NRF boards and scatter them around your house and they'll advertise sensor readings out. And then you have, in the BroadcastNet guide, it's Raspberry Pis that are listening to the BLE traffic and then using Wi-Fi to write it to wherever you care about. So I'm really excited to be able to switch that from Raspberry Pi to just ESP32-S3s or even C3s. Very inexpensive things that could bridge. But then again, like if they're so inexpensive, you could just use Wi-Fi directly as well. What I usually use, thinking more about Hamslab's talking about merge here, what I like Sublime Merge for is actually, it's a great, I do printf debugging, and so this Sublime Merge is a great way for me to find all the printfs and just revert them. So you can do things like drag this and say revert these lines. Unexpected Maker doesn't know power consumption numbers either. It's all early days. So yeah, don't know. Carestring says, in my experience, Wi-Fi is pretty power hungry. My ESP8266 drained AA batteries as if they were Jaeger shots on spring break. Yeah. And the standard Lady Ada answer is, if you care about power, you should measure it yourself with the PPK2. I have one. That is the tool I use. I don't know where it is. It's not under my desk like I thought it was. Love the Factory asks, are there any examples of in CircuitPython doing double buffering aka glitch-free bucket logging, maybe via M2M. I don't know what that means. I don't know what you mean by that, unfortunately. DCD says, speaking of power consumption, how well does the Nordic Power tool work with measuring other processors' power usage? So the PPK2 is designed to measure power flowing through it, not the power itself. It's got, where is it? I know I have one, and I thought it was under here. Oh, here it is. Let me show it. Time for this, and I'll switch views. Yeah, so these run like $100, and they are actually just an NRF52840. You can see it here. But they got a nice diagram here where they show you there's just 4 header pins here for power in and power out, and then it measures how much power is going through that. And then there's actually, like, you can do pin capture on a logic port as well. And you can see USB data and power, and then also USB power only. And then this is like this window gets lit up by like RGB LEDs. But yeah, it's been really great. I was using it when we did the ESP32-S3 low power stuff. This is the tool that I was using for that. I have a more expensive Joule scope that I got, but it's like $700. So the PPK2 is just a great deal. It's a great deal. And it was totally enough for what I was working on. So yeah, if you need power stuff, then it's really helpful. People are like, what can I expect for this power consumption? And it's like, there are so many variables that you just need to measure it. Thomas asks, do you have any information if there are NRF52840 successors on the horizon with more RAM memory? I would not expect more stuff in the NRF52840 family because they actually do have the next generation of Nordic chips already out. The NRF5340, I think is what it is. I think this is the newer Nordic stuff. Let's see what it's got. So it's a dual core Bluetooth 5.3 SoC supporting Bluetooth LE, Bluetooth Mesh, NFC. It is 512K RAM. It's 2 processors. One is 512K RAM and the other is 64K RAM. So yeah, we know what the next generation NRF stuff is, and we haven't added support for it, partly because NRF has desktop. Sorry, thank you. We need to figure out how to have the chat control what screen I'm on, right? Yeah, so this is as far as I know, this series is the newer generation of Nordic chips, the NRF5340. I'm not sure you can get them. I think they are more expensive. But one of the reasons we don't support this is they stopped doing the Nordic soft device support, and they're moving towards Zephyr, is my understanding. And we don't have Zephyr support in CircuitPython. So, yeah. There's a newer Nordic chip already out with more memory, but we don't currently support it. And then this 9160 is cellular. Oh, but the 5340 does LE audio. But yeah, you can see it's the 53 series versus the 52 series. Pierre says the 5340 haven't seen any modules or anything using them. Did that say dual M33s? Yes. Dual M33s. My understanding is that the Cortex M33 is like a successor kind of the M4. You could also use one of the INA breakout boards. I think that my understanding is the reason that the PPK2 is nice is that it's the software on it's written to be able to do very high dynamic currents. And if you just use a breakout board, I'm not sure they do that well. Right, the 5340 is dual core, one for the radio, one for your stuff. And Ham's Lab linked to an Andreas Spiess video on ESP32 low power. The PPK has an NRF52, not 5340. I think it's an 52840. And why didn't they expose Bluetooth connectivity? That would include having to make an app for it, probably. And you can't get as much data over Bluetooth as you can over USB. Unexpected Maker says, I get asked every week on my Discord, how big a battery will I need on the Tiny Pico to last 8 hours? That's it. No other info. Drives me back crazy. Yeah. Ryan says the second core is basically just a built-in HCI adapter, so if you can get the IPC to work on bare metal, you don't need Zephyr. Oh, you know what? That reminds me, Ryan, one of the reasons I'm excited to be working on BLE for the ESP chips is that they have two host implementations. They use Bluedroid for the ESP32 because it does classic Bluetooth, but then they use Nimble. And Nimble is this kind of grew up at the same time as Zephyr and really hasn't quite taken off, but it's a lot more separated than the rest of the system. So Nimble is another open source stack, and I was looking and they do actually have NRF5340 support. So if we look in Apache Minute Nimble, like they added support for the NRF5340. So I'm hoping what would be really ideal is we get ESP BLE working. It's actually using Nimble. It's not very ESP specific. And then potentially, hopefully, we can then maybe swap out soft device for the 53 or the 52840 and the 833 and just use Nimble kind of for both Nordic and ESP. And then Nimble has support for the 5340. Which would mean that we can then, we would be able to support that new chip as well, which would be cool. Pierre says, I get the same questions for wireless keyboards. How big a battery drives me nuts too. Yeah. Yep. It's a tough problem. And batteries change too. The PPK2 is great though, because prior to that, the best out-of-the-box solutions were like $600 to $800, and the PPK2 is only $100. I don't know if we have any in stock. No, we don't. So you could subscribe to this. But yeah, they're a very handy tool if you care about power consumption. Okay, so we've talked about ESP BLE. We've gotten sidetracked by Nordic chips. So if you want to follow along, this ESP BLE branch is where I'm doing the work. I've gotten it, all the Nordic stuff stripped out, and I got it compiling, which is great. And yeah, Pierre says, and then they want RGB for every key and they use a lot of power. Yep. Yeah. Dylan asks, how much does it cost to 3D print / machine / injection mold something? There is no more info than that provided, not even a rough object size. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's a good teaching moment. It's a good teaching moment, and it takes patience. I'm very thankful for all the people on our Discord who have more patience than I do to answer questions like this. So thank you all for helping people learn. Okay, so for this ESP BLE stuff, it compiles. I had to figure out how to get the linking right because I did actually change a few things to actually start calling into Nimble. So that was really good. And then the next steps for that is there's like advertising and scanning are the next things I'm going to do. Ooh, Tigerbyte says DigiKey has a bunch of PPK2s in stock. Is it me not following closely, or has it been a long time since a new product was leaked in this stream and in turn sold out in less than an hour? Yeah, I don't think I talked about new products recently on the stream. We did have Lady Ada on last week, but PPK2s are at DigiKey and at Mouser. So if you're doing power stuff, that's your answer. And that's really true for pretty much everything. If you're doing debugging of like I2C or SPI, you should really have a logic analyzer as well. Thank you, Cams. Unexpected Maker says, I used to be quite patient and explain all of the variables and why I can't give them an answer. Now I almost reply, how long is a piece of string? Yeah. That's why it's great to have a community that can help you when you're not patient. I do find myself doing like forum support, and if I go through the forum and I'm just like, I can't help this person, I just don't, right? Like, I'm not obligated to reply people, and there's other people on the forums that are really helpful too. So I think it's important to remember that, of like, you don't have to. Other people could. Okay, so getting a compiling is a good thing. I want to do scanning and advertising next. And then once you can do scanning and advertising, then you can do connections. Once you do connections, then you can either go into how do I store my bonding information, which is a whole tangent, or doing the service and characteristic and descriptor discovery stuff, which is going to be tricky. So I'm going to start with scanning and advertising, and we'll go from there. And I had to remember to tell myself that if I need to reference the code that I was deleting, I could just look at the NRF port. There was like a couple, like I've done some ports before where I just comment everything out because I want it as a reference. But the problem with that is that it makes the diffs when you do a pull request really complicated. So it's much better to just show added code rather than have a bunch of deleted code as well. He says, there's an art to balancing mental health and time when it comes to helping others online. Wireless keyboards still scare me with the lack of encryption on most of them. Not that I think that anyone would stiff my keyboard packets. Yep. I guess just pointing people at the PPK2 and say, go at it, works for me. Okay, so I wanted to make more progress on this ESP BLE stuff than I actually did, but Lady Ada was working on both the S3 and the C3 this week, and so what came up was kind of like some more like core issues that we just had to fix. So I thought I would just look through, talk those over, and just highlight them by like what pull requests I did this week. Pierre says, answering the same question over and over, that's why the ZMK folks created their power estimator and they only point to it now. Interesting. I didn't think Zephyr did low power very well. Is that not true? I know that I know it's on the radar, but I didn't think they had actually done that yet. Okay, let's take a look at pull requests that I've authored. Did a lot this week. Okay, so only make CircuitPython read-only with USB. I just did this today, and it's still building. It's a really simple change where in main, we will set the internal file system is writable by USB, kind of as we're booting up. But I made a change so that if CircuitPy USB is disabled, meaning 0, then it won't actually make it writable by USB, because that makes it not writable from CircuitPython. And this came up, Jerry was asking about this for the ESP32-S3, which doesn't have USB support, and you weren't able to just like open a file and write to it. But with this change, we will automatically, for all builds that don't have USB, we'll just allow you to write to it directly. And Jerry tested it and said that it works with AMP. So that's a good advanced way of doing CircuitPython on boards that don't have USB. The default second core firmware uses HCI. Yeah, I mean, we have... Yeah. I've talked with Lady Ada about supporting the NRF53, and it's just not been... you know, it's a mix of price and availability. It's just not been that worth it. If people want to add support for it, I'm open to it, but I think we're foreseeing more ESP chips coming and being available, like the S3 and the C3. So that's where my focus is right now. And then Jeff's doing floppy disk stuff, and Dan's doing more USB work for showing multiple mass storage drives through USB. Is what Dan's working on. Sorry, I had to ban somebody on Twitch. I watched this Hackaday presentation of this guy in Dallas that reverse engineered the smart power meters there. Oh, nice. YouTube's been recommending that to me. I was curious. I would love to get the readings from my meter here just to know what my power use is. ZMK is a keyboard built on top of Zephyr. They're focusing on the NRF52840 but are expanding. Is that if you need to troubleshoot your hardware, you have nothing to work with, unlike CircuitPython or Arduino. Interesting. I didn't think they did low power that well in Zephyr yet, but maybe that's wrong. Foamy Guy says, multiple drives, like being able to directly see and change files on the SD card plugged into a PyPortal would be amazing. Yes, that's one of the reasons we're doing that. The other is floppy drives. Can you see a theme? Okay, so that's one thing I was doing that's not merged in yet. We got this report of a pink feather RP2040 feather not working, and we discovered that there was a different flash chip on it. It seems to have worked without this PR, but I wanted to make sure that we had both possible flash chips listed there. Yeah, WebBSK says the Remoticon hash outsmarts its smart meter. Yeah, I think that's the one. Live minute-to-minute power reading is the holy grail of collecting your own data. Yeah, I've got some power plugs that check it out, but I haven't done a lot with that data. That's the crux. Okay, so yeah, I did a lot. Let's see. Switch CircuitPython to Core 1 on the S3. That's pretty straightforward, and I talked about that earlier today. And that did cause a couple problems. I did that, and then I also did a fix to fix some builds. The S2 builds weren't working, but I changed, if there's no external PSRAM, we had like a hard-coded value for how much heap we would request. And now in CircuitPython, we'll have different values for that for the S3 and the C3. So on the S2, we only request 48K, but now on the S3, because it has 100 and something odd more RAM, we request 176K. So the idea being that we are kind of like resource constrained about like how many connections we have, but we use the rest of that space for the CircuitPython heap. So this only applies to boards that don't have external PSRAM, but it could be kind of interesting. And then for the C3, it's going to be 88K. So that's your CircuitPython heap size on these different boards. So now it'll vary. And then next, I have the ESP32-S3 board, which is the board I was showing earlier. This board here, I added a board definition for. That's in this pull request. And then Lamore reported that with her Wi-Fi demos or Wi-Fi tests, they were crashing a lot. And what I found out is I did a debug build and I loaded it up and discovered that there was an assertion error when I was doing a debug build. And the assertion was that I was releasing a lock that was taken on a different core, which is very weird. And so I think this is the first CircuitPython multi-core bug that I've ever fixed. So the Wi-Fi stack is running, Wi-Fi stack and BLE will be running on the first core, and that's what starts up first. And then it starts up CircuitPython on the second core. But it turns out there's a timer task that the ESP uses for timing both like stuff you want to time and stuff that like Wi-Fi and BLE wants to time. And that runs on the first core as well. And so we use that for supervisor ticks. And so what was happening is that supervisor ticks was calling CircuitPython code from the first core while the second core was still running. And that was a problem. That's how we were getting the first core grabbing a lock that we were trying to manipulate on the second core. The Shelly plugs. Yeah, the holy grail of whole house collection. So basically what I had to do to fix this is the ESP IDF has a way to run IPC calls, so like interprocessor calling. So basically there's a task on each, there's a FreeRTest task on each core, I think, that from the other core you can say like, hey, run this in this other FreeRTest task. So that's what this change does is in a multi-core environment, we'd use this ESP IPC call to run So the main task in this case is CircuitPython. So we say call tick on CircuitPython core with the task affinity that matches the main task, which is CircuitPython. And then we have a separate function here. And if we're in a unicore like the S2, we just call it directly. We don't go through that little jump. And there's two different ways of doing these calls. One is blocking, so you wait till it finishes. But we don't actually care about that. We just care that it runs on the same core. So this call that runs on the first core only waits until the function starts on the second one, and then it can give it back, which should be better, hopefully. So that was a thing I fixed. Let's see. I found that NeoPixels were weird. I was being blinded by the NeoPixel on the S3 dev board I have. And one thing was that CircuitPython would float pins that it wasn't using. It would float them, meaning that they don't have a pull up or pull down. They just are kind of at the whim of the environment. And therefore that causes like the values to just like bounce. And that when the NeoPixel's listening to that floating bounce, it can get all sorts of random values out of it. And so I changed the way that we reset pins on the ESPs. We now will call the GPIO reset pin, which is the IDF version, and it ends up pulling up all the pins. And that prevents the floating. But when I did that, I did have to do some tweaks to NeoPixels. One thing I did is I measured the timing, and the timing wasn't spectacular, so I tweaked the timing values that are used for it. And then I also discovered that in the new blinking status patterns that we do in CircuitPython, NeoPixels, in some cases, you send them their colors, and then you have to wait for a while for it to take effect. And in particular, the new WS2812s have a 300 microsecond period that they need to be left alone, and that gets invalidated if we de-init our pins and pull them high really quickly. So this is me tweaking the values, and also adding a buffer of like, don't send them so fast that we don't have that. And then then I added a guard in the status LED stuff so that the status LED both wouldn't, oh, I guess I don't have the, it doesn't worry about sending a subsequent one, but it does make sure that before we reset the pin, we waited the reset period. What I was seeing is that it would like blink on red, and then it would deactivate so fast that the red wouldn't go away because the data send for zeros would not be followed by like the low period that it needed. Hams Lab says, the phrase pull up is going to have a different meaning in the next year. I know what you're referring to. I don't think our kid's going to get to pull ups in the first year, though. I think it's going to be all diapers all the time. Although pull up, I guess, could also mean them starting to stand, which they will do in the next year. BC Hydro allows users to buy a third-party device that can get real-time data for your smart meter. Connect resonance. All right, so this NeoPixel stuff also did the reset pin changes. That's what this is. You can see we had this copy of pin reset that floated instead of pulled up, which I got rid of because I insisted on it and I shouldn't have. I hadn't realized that the lower power state for pins is not floating. It's actually lower power to pull, which is somewhat counterintuitive to me. But the reason is that the pulls are really weak, and what can happen is there's an input buffer This is like a transistor, and that transistor will like alternate and fluctuate with the floating values and actually take more power than the pull-up resistor would. Which is interesting, and I found a PDF about that at some point, so you could find it. But basically, yeah, it's better to actually pull your pins when you're not using them. So that's a big change, and it has knock-on consequences. For example, I broke a number of builds, which is weird. Like the QtPy didn't work, but the Feather did work, and the Metro did work, but the QtPy didn't work. And what I think I figured out is that I was resetting the flash pins, which you shouldn't do because they're in use. And so what I did is I refactored like the pins that we just never reset. So we have this notion of never reset, which you can call, but then in the implementation for pin resetting, you can actually just say like, if it's this number, we just never do it. So I actually made board definitions simpler. Like any board that has USB will just never reset it. I did have to add the notion of what double tap pin every board has, because double tap checks whether the value of the pin is high. And so if you hit the reset button and we had pulled it up, you would end up in the UF2 bootloader. You wouldn't go back around to CircuitPython. So now CircuitPython has to pull that particular pin down to get the right thing. All right, David would like the low power PDF. I'll try to find, where did low power pin state. I have to look at my history. Where was that? Input buffer. Oh, you know, it might be this. I think this is it. Avoid floating unused pins. I think this is what my brain's thinking of. I will post the link. I tried to look for something ESP specific, but wasn't able to find it. Okay, so I simplified a lot of this. And there were some boards that were already never resetting the flash and RAM pins, which I deleted them here because further down in the port, I just made it blanket do that. So there's now this internal reset pin. If you're on S2 or S3, then this range of pins never get reset. If you're doing octal SPI RAM, which some of the S3 modules do, then these 5 additional pins are in that category. If you have USB, then 19 and 20 are considered. If you're on a C3, then there's different flash pins there. And then besides that, then we'll reset it. And if it's a double tap pin, we change the pull-up values. So yeah, I tweaked that. And then I changed the compiler optimization for debug builds because it didn't fit when I was debugging it. So Yeah, that brings us to now. So Unexpected Maker said earlier that the S3 wasn't working, so maybe I will just try it on what I've got here. Let's just test it. I just restarted my computer, so I'm going to have to do the environment stuff. This is the C3 writable build, so it's fine to just do. All right, pretty good on timing. Oops, I always do that. I have it working if I build from IDF 44RC1. You had to change the IDF version that we're on? Is the RC1 newer? We're currently building off a Adafruit branch of the IDF. Seems when CircuitPython boots, the serial device is no longer available. The serial, you mean the UART serial? I think that should be only enabled if you're doing a debug build. I think it's how we do it. Okay. I was frustrated with the, not the C3, but the QtPy S2 doesn't have the default UART broken out, which was kind of annoying when I was debugging it. Okay, let me do UART. And port. I just built against my IDF install. CircuitPython is using 44dev. USB serial device. No, it should work. USB serial should work on the S3. We'll see. We'll test it. Just gonna update or build mine. Oh, are you on S2 and it's not working? Let me tell you, these S3 dev boards are quite nice. I wish there was an S2 in this version. Having the two USB plugs on has been spoiling me. I actually have a Feather S2 right on my desk though, that I can test with as well. But I don't know why it wouldn't work. Can I open port? I thought you were meaning it wasn't working on S3. As far as I know, it should be working. But there is stuff. There is an S2 version with two USB ports? Really? How do I get this? Products, dev kits, dev kit C. Oh, I want dev kit M, don't I? 32. Or dev kits. Where does that take me? S3 series. I thought it was dev kits. Oh, the Gravitech Cucumber boards. Ah, here we go. It has all the S3 pins exposed. But yeah, that looks like what I want. Yeah, these Salas are the ones that are older. All right, does DigiKey have these? I don't know, does Adafruit carry them? Nope. I shall order these. If I can actually get them. Exact match. Can ship immediately. Look who's gonna make a DigiKey order today. Like, I'm sold on that, I'll tell you that much. It doesn't have, should I get 2? Sure, why not? Oh, I've got NeoPIxels in my cart. I'm pretty sure I got these. Those are for my keyboard. Oh, there's a... Right. Oh, RF evaluation boards and kits. In stock. I don't care about part status. And let's just do espresso. Let's see what they got. S2 Sala is not what I want. C3, this is what I have. 32 dev kit. I just got here. Why is Scott getting the old and busted S2 board? I want the dual. Yeah, I only have the Sala. I think I've got enough ESP32s. Pico kit. This is the S3 kit. Ethernet. I am not going to miss the Sala. This only's got... This is the Solo. What is this one? Sorry if you can hear my fan. I don't know why it's spinning up. They don't have the flash, or they don't have the RAM, but that's okay. It's kind of weird that Espresso didn't put a second USB connector on the Sala. I think they learned their lesson. Oh, with one... I don't want the U one if I can get away with it. If it had mesh kit. Pico 0. C3 mini. All right, well, I think that's the one I want. That'll be nice. I like their naming. I like their newer naming scheme, the like N and then the R. N for flash, R for RAM. That board should have 2 megabytes PS RAM. All right, well, you know what I like to do on DigiKey? I know usually, I'm not aware of this category, but what I like to do is I like to do in stock, usually new products, and then sort by price. But because this category is not on my radar, I like to just do impulse buy. Mouser's got dev kit. Let's see. I want singles. I don't care what the price is if I buy 10,000. Look at that. Surprise, surprise, it's all the ESPs. But yeah, I have no love lost for this Salva form factor. But I think that all of these solos don't have RAM in them. I'll just these again. Oh, is this still with Espressif only? Oh yeah, like delete that. I don't know how that got in there. $82.66, $433, Cypress Bluetooth board, Micromod update tool. Hey, a feather. USB programmer. More Cypress BLE. Is that the... Like Cypress bought the Wi-Fi division from Broadcom. Sala. We were talking about the S2 and just being able to easily test it. I was saying how much I like these S3 boards, and somebody pointed out that there is an S2 board with 2 USBs on it as well. So I was like, oh, does DigiKey have it? And they do. So now I'm going to be like, what else should I buy from DigiKey? Since I'm going to make an order. I don't think there's any Espressif dev kits that I need. I think it's fun that there's, like, I have this, I think. It's funny that there's Adafruit stuff in here. Cypress. Nordic NRF52-840 dongle, I already have that. Network transmit stuff I don't care about. My like impulse buy is like 20 bucks or less. Which can get me into trouble. Let's be real. Smart speaker dev kit. Oh, from M5 Stack. Interesting. Dialog, LoRaWAN. JTAG across USB. S3 more room. I think I picked up the Amoeba one. This is a module, actually. Daughter card. The Artemis. serial to Ethernet. Did you expect me to just browse DigiKey on the stream? Yeah, I should go through my dev boards and decide which ones I don't want still. But they can be really handy if you need to debug stuff. Blue Gecko from Silicon Labs. I always wanted to like use a Scilabs thing, but never found one that was worth it. PSOCs require that like separate IDE. Better you browsing than me. I'd be impulsing buying all the things. I have a lot of these things already. Browsing DigiKey on the live stream has proved popular by a little more. Yeah, we'll definitely check out the microcontroller dev kit category as well. Thanks, Paul. Have a good night. I know we've run out of time here. I don't think I see anything. Usually what I'll do is I won't look through everything like I'm looking through now. I'll only look at new stuff, which I'm about to do. I'm always looking to see what the new microcontrollers are. ESP32 power over Ethernet. Interesting. I don't usually look at this category. That's why I'm here. NDK with case. That's kind of neat. Z-Wave. Z-Wave could be cool for home automation stuff. All right, let's get out of here. Out of this. I do want to look at the dev kits too. Maybe I won't do that on the stream. I should finish my thought with this. So let's just hit reset. And actually switch the USB over to native USB, and we should see it pop up. Unless it is broken, which it looks like it might be. Well, bummer. Maybe I didn't fix the issue. It doesn't even start up for me. Okay. What are we doing? Yeah, so it's RTC software CPU reset. That's probably what's happening. How is it broken again? So it's not just you, Unexpected Maker. Sometimes it mounts, sometimes it doesn't. This is interesting here. Let's see if a debug build. All right, we should call it because I know people kind of plan around the 2-hour mark. All right, well, let me wrap up. If you want to follow along, I'll probably keep working on this. I just won't be streaming. So join the Discord server. We're chatting there. We'll probably chat in CircuitPython dev. You can join by going to the URL adafru.it/discord. I'm going to take a look at this expressive bug and also make an order from DigiKey. Thank you all for hanging out. I'll switch to here. As always, my name is Scott. I work on CircuitPython for Adafruit. You want to support me, you can do that by supporting Adafruit. They pay me to do these streams, and they pay me to work on CircuitPython. You can do that by going to adafruit.com, purchasing hardware there. We were on DigiKey just a little bit before. Remember that if it's out of stock on adafruit.com, it might be in stock on DigiKey. So don't forget to check that out as well. If you do want to join the Discord, the URL is adafru.it/discord. Go ahead and check that out. Again, I think next week, I haven't checked my calendar, but we should be on Friday. We do have a limited time period for deep dives because, again, we're having a kid, and so that's not going to happen. We'll get some cat pets in here, don't worry. Last up, I want to say thank you to Patrick and David for doing notes and collating them and linking them up. So thank you both. Thanks, David, for taking the notes. Patrick, thanks for getting them in the repo. We really appreciate it. And please, if you haven't done a CircuitPython 2022, I'd love to hear what you have in mind for that. Consider it like we have one last week, and then we'll kind of like close it down, and I'll stop bugging people. So with that, thank you all. I'll take the mic off, pet the cat, and keep on working after that. So we'll go to cat cam. Are you ready for some pets? He usually gets on my lap after the stream, so I wake him up and get him excited. All right. Have a great weekend, everyone.